The lantern hanging from the rafters swayed in the wind that seeped through the walls, its light flickering, making the room alternately dark and bright. The black stone statue looked like a person buried alive, with only its head exposed, the rest buried in the sand. I approached to look closer and saw that on the eyes of the stone figure there was a large ant, as big as a thumb joint, its whole body pure black, and its tail blood red. Each time the flickering light of the lantern shone on it, a faint gleam appeared, making it look from a distance as if light was emanating from the stone figure's eyes. Seeing it was just an ant, I casually flicked it, sending it flying to the ground. I stepped on it and heard a squish. The ant was crushed, but I found it a bit strange. Its body was much harder than that of a normal ant. I looked around. The dilapidated room had drafts everywhere. I had no idea where the ant came from. Shirley Yang ran over and asked me what was wrong. I told her it was nothing, just an ant, and I had killed it. I woke up Fatty Tuyen, who was sound asleep, to stand guard. Then I added some solid fuel to the fire to make it bigger, turned off the lantern, and crawled into my sleeping bag for a nap. My body was tired, so I fell asleep immediately. When I woke up, it was past 9 in the morning the next day. The sandstorm outside had raged all night and still hadn't stopped, though the wind strength was much less than yesterday. This monstrous storm was finally coming to an end. Most of this ancient city's ruins were buried in sand, with not much exposed above ground. With perhaps 2 more major sandstorms like this, the nameless ancient city might disappear into the desert. However, even if completely buried in sand, it doesn't mean it's permanently buried. More than half of the Taklamakan Desert consists of shifting sands, and with desert strips being blown away by the wind, who knows how many years it will be before they resurface to greet the sunlight again. Hatch I Kwok was directing several students in excavating the stone statue in the corner of the wall. They had already dug down to the statue's thighs. Everyone gathered to watch. Only old Anlaman took advantage of the weakening wind to go look after the camels sheltering beneath the city wall. I rummaged in my bag for some dry rations. While eating, I watched everyone digging sand. Joining this archaeological team into the desert, besides wanting to see if there were any large ancient tombs, I also wanted to learn some archaeological experience from these experts. Fearing damage to the carvings on the statue's body, they only used engineer shovels to clear the outer sand, then used flat shovels and brushes to clean it bit by bit, cleaning each section as it was unearthed, while also meticulously recording their findings. Professor Chen, seeing that I was awake, nodded a greeting. It seemed his health was no longer a concern. He told me it was time to let the students practice a bit, gaining some practical experience. While theoretical learning was important in archaeology, field practice was equally crucial. Seeing more, interacting more, and working hands-on at the site would provide an intuitive sense, leading to rapid progress when combined with theory. In no time, the students had finished cleaning the statue's base. It was my first time seeing this type of large-eyed stone human figure. The statue was dressed in Hu people's clothing with both arms hanging down, and many patterns carved on its body like some kind of tantric scripture. According to Professor Chen, these texts had never been deciphered. However, with the expansion of archaeological research in recent years, experts believe these might be a type of symbol or code, recording information about ancient religions. As for why these symbols were carved onto the statue's body, it was likely related to sacrificial rituals. But related documents, murals, and historical records showed no mention, so everything remained mere speculation. Taptabang sat beside, listening to the professor's explanation, and respectfully asked, "Professor, the shape of this stone statue is very different from ordinary people. I feel that in ancient times, there might have been a religion that worshipped extraterrestrials. After they saw people from other planets arrive, they might have thought them to be gods, and then created a series of statues like this for worship. The symbols on the statue's body could be a form of alien language." Hatch I Kwok immediately criticized, "Bang, you're always slacking off in your studies. How many times have I told you, you're a smart kid, but your thinking shouldn't be skewed, and now you're bringing aliens into it. You need to be serious about history and archaeology." Professor Chen was not annoyed. On the contrary, he offered a gentle smile. Having imagination is not bad. Young men are quick-witted, which is very good. Being united and urgent, serious and lively are not contradictory. However, in our work of archaeology and historical research, we must adhere to one principle. Propose bold hypotheses, but verify them carefully. Imagination must be built on real evidence. Imagination without evidence is unreliable. Let's take this big-eyed statue as an example. Ancient people like to predict fortune and misfortune through astronomical phenomena. Every night, they would gaze up at the starry sky. Perhaps they hoped their eyes could see even further. When carving the statue, did they entrust their aspirations to it? This possibility is very high. In the Songqingdui mounds in Sichuan, similar statues with long, protruding eyes have been excavated. Conservatively speaking, this could very well be an embodiment of the ancients' desire to understand and explore the world. Upon hearing this, I was greatly impressed. Indeed, the professor's expertise was different. He didn't use grand theories. Compared to him, Hachai Kwok was still no match. Professor Chen continued, "The aliens you mention are not impossible to exist, but we shouldn't immediately think of fictional science fiction stories from foreign novels whenever they're brought up. In fact, the earliest records of extraterrestrials appeared in our Chinese murals and writings. 7,500 years ago, in the murals of a primitive tribe in the Helen Mountains, there appeared drawings of astronauts in spacesuits emerging from a large round disk. Animals and nearby inhabitants scattered in fright. These things, it is feared, could not have been imagined by early humans. That was likely a documentary mural, recording an event, much like a great accident that had occurred. Similar incidents were also recorded in tripods from the Xia and Zhou dynasties, and in some other ancient texts. At this moment, old Anlaman, braving the wind and sand, jumped down from a hole in the ceiling, announcing to everyone that the sandstorm was about to end. In less than half an hour, the sky would clear. Thanks to Allah's blessing, the sand had almost completely filled the outer wall. If the wind had blown for 2 more hours, we would surely have been buried alive here today. Originally, everyone was still a bit worried. Although they saw the wind weakening, they didn't know when it would stop. Now, with old Anlaman's words, they were completely at ease. The students continued to listen attentively to Professor Chen's lecture. I sat by the fire, boiling a kettle of tea, preparing for everyone to drink before setting off. Just as the tea boiled, the people sitting around the big-eyed statue suddenly shouted loudly and jumped back. Someone yelled, "Oh, so many ants!" Another screamed, "Oh my God, there are some here too!" I quickly ran over to see what was happening, only to see a large lump of sand at the base of the statue suddenly swell up, then big ants streamed out like a spring. Someone used a shovel to hit them, killing hundreds with one blow, but at the same time thousands more emerged from under the sand. They swarmed and wriggled, giving me goosebumps. Initially, we thought they had dug into an ant nest, but now we immediately realized it wasn't. Dozens of large holes appeared on the ground, and more ants crawled out from them. Each ant had a glossy black body and a bright red tail in 2 colors, black and red, like a broken dike, with a tide of them gushing out. Old Anlaman took one look, then quickly turned and ran outside. Fatty Tuyan's group still intended to keep hitting them with engineer shovels, but in an instant, the ants were too numerous to handle. Shirley Yang, a photographer for National Geographic magazine, had traveled widely and was very knowledgeable. I heard her anxiously call out to everyone, "Everyone, climb out of here right now. Those are desert fire ants. If you're half a step slow, they'll chew us down to bones." Tens of thousands of desert fire ants had filled half the room, and more continued to emerge from under the ground. Not only from the ground, but ants were also crawling out from the rafters and wall cracks everywhere. Professor Chen and Deep Diek Tam, among others, were so terrified their legs trembled, unable to move a single step forward. Not to mention the intellectuals, even Fatty Tuyan and I were trembling. Those desert fire ants were truly terrifying. It was entirely possible that the human skeletons in this room were their handiwork. No wonder there was no flesh left. I tried to calm down and looked around at everyone, realizing old Anlaman had run away first again. This sly old man, whenever he saw danger, he would immediately flee, even though last night he had sworn to endure hardships together with everyone. It seemed that hitting them with engineer shovels could no longer stop the surging tide of desert fire ants. I kicked over the fire that was boiling tea, poured out half a flask of solid fuel, creating a wall of fire in the room. The ants that touched the firewall were immediately scorched, momentarily halting their overwhelming advance. The ants were too numerous and charged directly into the firewall with a suicidal spirit, hoping to use their numbers to extinguish the flames. Fortunately, the solid fuel burned very intensely. However, it was only a matter of time before the ants overwhelmed the fire. Taking advantage of this brief time, we grabbed whatever luggage and equipment we could, dragging and pulling, and ran out of the dilapidated house. The sandstorm outside was very light now. We saw hundreds of golden goats, wild camels, desert wolves, desert rats, and desert lizards all scattering wildly amidst the ruins. Not only the room we had been sheltering in, but now many other places were also swarming with tens of thousands of ants. Some slow, moving animals were immediately engulfed by the ant tide. Desert fire ants have a lot of biological acid in their mouths. When thousands upon thousands of them rushed to gnaw, even an elephant wouldn't be able to withstand it. Golden goats and desert wolves fell to the ground in droves. After the ants passed, only piles of white bones remained. The number of desert fire ants in the city was not just 1,000,000. It seemed the entire ancient city was a giant ant nest. We were besieged on the rooftop, only able to swing our engineer shovels to knock away the ants crawling close. Below the city wall in the distance, old Anlaman was hastily untying the ropes that bound the camel caravan. I threw the gun to Fatty Tuyen, shoot at his hat. Fatty Tuyen raised the gun without hesitation, aimed straight at old Anlaman, and pulled the trigger. With a bang, old Anlaman's leather hat was sent flying into the air by the bullet. The old man, startled, retracted his neck and turned to look at everyone standing on the rooftop. I shouted loudly, "Old man, if you dare to run away, the second shot will be aimed at your backside." Hu Tai certainly wouldn't object. Old Anlaman frantically waved his hands, indicating he wouldn't run away anymore. But the house below was now full of fire ants, so we couldn't go down for the time being. In our confusion, we suddenly saw a wall collapse with a crash, and an ant as big as a goat crawled out from behind it. This was the queen ant. It had 6 pairs of large transparent wings on its body. Perhaps the desert storm had disturbed the queen ant hidden deep within the inner chamber, and it was preparing to move. Seeing the queen ant's imposing presence, every member of the archaeological team turned pale. Shirley Yang cried out, "Cut the snake's head. Quickly shoot the queen ant dead." Fatty Tuyen slapped his sports air rifle a few times, stomping his foot in a panic. "This barrel is too small, damn it, it can't shoot." Although he said that, he still fired all the remaining bullets at the queen ant. I took down the cloth used to block the sandstorm, wrapped up all the remaining solid fuel, lit a corner of the cloth with a lighter, and made it into an incendiary grenade to throw down at the queen ant below. This trick, surprisingly, achieved a miracle. The fire, fueled by the wind, engulfed the entire body of the enormous queen ant. It writhed in pain, rolling around on the sand, and the more it rolled, the larger the flames became. This type of solid compressed fuel, even a small piece, could burn for more than 10 minutes, let alone over half a barrel, which was approximately 1 kilogram. The fire grew larger and larger. The ants all around scattered as if their nest had been broken, frantically rushing towards the queen ant, hoping to use their vast numbers to extinguish the flames. Seeing that the opportunity had arrived, I waved to everyone. Then, shouldering an engineer shovel, I jumped down first to chase away a few stray desert fire ants. So Keen, strong and sturdy, carried Professor Chen. Hatch Ai Kwok and Deep Diak Tam helped each other, and Fatty Tuyen brought up the rear. The group rushed out of the hole. By then, old Anlaman had brought the frightened camels under control. Everyone climbed onto the camels, urging them to run out of the city. Every now and then, wild animals darted across. Normally, if they encountered each other, they would fight to the death, but at this moment each was concerned only for itself, all fleeing for dear life. The camel caravan ran for several hundred meters. I turned my head to look back, and the crumbling ruins of the ancient city were no longer visible. Like waves of pure black and red surging and crashing, countless desert fire ants swarmed up from the ground. However, as long as we weren't surrounded by them, there was no longer any danger. Old Anlaman explained that he intended to run ahead to untie the ropes binding the camels, otherwise the ants would gnaw them down to mere bones. At that point, even if we wanted to escape, we wouldn't be able to. It wasn't that he intended to run away first. Fatty Tuyen didn't believe him, pointing his thumb at the gun on his back. "Old man, don't babble to me. If you want to explain later, go explain to this gun." Old Anlaman's reason seemed very convincing, and it was impossible to conclude that he had abandoned everyone to escape alone. Later, in this desert, there would still be many places where we needed him. I didn't want this incident to cause a rift between us, so I immediately stopped Fatty Tuyen from saying anything more. I said to Old Anlaman, "We met the white camel in this desert, and escaped the encirclement of the desert fire ants. These are all Hu Tai's will. Hu Tai considers us brothers, faithful believers, so we trust you. Anyone who betrays brothers and friends will surely be punished by Hu Tai." Old Anlaman frantically agreed, "Oh Allah, Hu Tai is the only true Lord. We are all the best of brothers and friends, Allah will surely protect us." The knot, too, long knot, too, short piece interspersed with frightening sounds ended here. But who knew what other troubles awaited us in the ancient city of Teda, deep within that sea of sand? I still tried to think of ways to persuade Professor Chen's team to return. We were less than half a day's journey from the ruins of the ancient city of Teda. The wind had subsided, and the sun hung like a fiery ball in the sky. When traveling in the desert, the most important thing is to keep oneself hydrated. Traveling during the day is generally highly taboo, but we still had enough water, and we could replenish fresh water upon reaching Teda city. Therefore, we continued deeper into the desert, braving the scorching, fiery sun. During the day, the desert landscape also possessed its own beauty. In ancient times, the movement of the Himalayan mountain range formed the Tarim Basin. The topography of the entire Xinjiang region resembled a large bowl, filled with gleaming golden sand. Our group of 9 people and 19 camels was truly tiny, not even 1/10,000th of a single grain of sand in that bowl of golden sand. The desert was vast, boundless. Without the long trail of footprints behind us, one might not even realize they were continuously moving forward. Only then did I understand how admirable the explorers who ventured alone into the Gobi Desert were. Perhaps by wandering alone under the heavens and across the earth, they could truly grasp the meaning of life. While I admired them, I would never intend to do such a thing in my life. Group living was more suitable for me. Taptabang and his companions were very curious. As they walked, they kept asking Shirley Young to tell them about desert fire ants. Shirley Young herself had never seen them firsthand, only witnessing villages after they were attacked by the ants, all gnawed down to white bones, an utterly tragic sight. This species of ant is also called army ants because they possess a high degree of organization and discipline, with soldier ants taking the lead. Compared to human armies, apart from the ability to use firepower and machinery, the organizational and coordination capabilities of human armies, no matter how trained, fundamentally cannot compare to theirs. As they walked and talked, the sand dunes underfoot were alternately low and high, with an unprecedented degree of undulation. Old Anlaman said that beneath these intricate sand mounds were ancient streets buried by golden sand. He led everyone up the highest sand dune, then pointed south and said that was their intermediate station, the ruins of the ancient city of Teda. I raised my binoculars, looked south, and in the midst of the vast sea of sand, an oasis appeared, filling my view. The oasis in the desert was like a sapphire embedded on a gold, inlaid chessboard. From a distance, a dark, weathered city stood imposingly in the region. The ruins of the ancient city of Teda were relatively well preserved. The city's age was also quite old, only being destroyed by the fires of war in the late Tang dynasty and lying derelict until today. In the early 19th century, German explorers discovered this place, and most of the murals, sculptures, and other valuable artifacts were all taken away by them. Only an empty city remained in the desert. The ancient Kong Tuak River stopped here. Because from ancient times until now, underground water veins flowed beneath the city's surface all year round, it had long become an important water supply point for travelers in the desert. The camel caravan left the sand dunes and slowly advanced towards the oasis. Old Anlaman discussed with us that upon reaching Tay Da City, they should rest for 2 days before entering the Black Desert. Once inside, it would be difficult to return. The camels had also been quite frightened these past few days and had to carry a lot of luggage, so it was essential to let them rest and regain their strength before continuing. These words were exactly what I wanted to hear. I only hoped to stop for a few more days, making it easier to find an excuse to persuade the archaeological team to return, no longer having to search for the ancient city of Tin Tuyat. Digging 2 or 3 holes nearby would be enough. Why bother with more exhaustion? Lately, I had increasingly felt powerless. If we continued deeper into the desert, sooner or later something big would happen. At that point, I feared we wouldn't be as lucky as before. I slowed the camel's pace, walking alongside Professor Chen, and said to him, "Professor, when we reach Tay Da City, can we rest for 3 or 5 days or even 5 or 6 days before setting off again?" Old Anlaman said the camels are exhausted. If we don't let them rest enough, we'll probably have to switch to driving vehicle number 11. Professor Chen didn't understand and asked, "What? Number 11? How do you drive that?" I replied, "Professor, don't you know about number 11? It means walking on 2 legs. Saying that, I used 2 fingers to mimic the gait of 2 legs. Isn't this number 11? Professor Chen laughed heartily. Uncle Yi, where did you come up with such a novel term?" "That's really interesting. All right, we'll organize ourselves in the city for a few days. I also want to survey the ruins of this famous city." From the sand dune, the oasis appeared not far away, but it took a full 3 hours to reach it. The city walls were built of black stone, with some parts having collapsed and eroded, severely damaged. Only the main fortress in the center was built very sturdily, and hints of its former glory could still be seen. Oil well workers, exploration teams, and geological survey teams who had passed through here all took refuge in this main fortress. Simply blocking the entrance with stones ensured they wouldn't be attacked by desert wolves. From the mid-1970s, Inner Mongolia, Xinjiang, and Tibet all saw a fervent wolf extermination campaign. Large wolf packs completely disappeared, with only small groups of 3 to 5 or solitary wolves remaining, not enough to pose a threat. Moreover, we were a large group and carried firearms, so naturally we had nothing to fear from the wolves. It was windy season then, and besides us, no one else frequented this place. So we found a spacious house in the city, lit a bonfire to boil tea and cook a meal. Old Anlaman and I found the ancient well in the city. It was said that this well had never run dry for thousands of years. Old Anlaman claimed it was a miracle from Hu Bayi, and I had no objections. We used a leather bucket to draw up a bucket of well water. The well was very deep. We had to let out dozens of meters of rope before hearing the bucket hit the water. After pulling it up, I took a gulp first. The water was cool and refreshing, seeping into my heart and liver, instantly dispelling all the heat from the scorching desert sun. An inexpressible feeling of relaxation swelled within me. The 19 camels were arranged to lie beside the well, each allowed to drink its fill. Then we gave them salt and bean cakes to eat. Afterwards, Old Anlaman and I drew up 2 large buckets of well water and brought them into the house where the archaeological team was resting. Everyone was utterly exhausted. They lay down on the ground and immediately fell into a deep sleep. Some still had half a piece of cake in their mouths, having fallen asleep mid-meal. I didn't want to disturb them. They had endured enough hardship these past few days. I boiled a large pot of water, then woke Professor Chen and his group, making them soak their feet in hot water and peel off any flaking skin. After everything was in order, I finally went to sleep, lying in a daze for a full day and night. Eventually, my weary body recovered. In the evening, everyone gathered together to listen to Fatty Tuyen boast. Fatty Tuyen, with his glib tongue, told everyone about the abundance of game in the ancient forests of the northeast and how delicious the delicacies were. Unlike this desert, which was all sand with strong winds, where even taking a bite of golden goat meat left your mouth full of sand. Especially in the Greater Khingan Range, everything delicious could be found. There was an old saying, wave a stick to hit a deer, scoop with a ladle to catch fish. Wild chickens jump into the pot on their own. Could everyone imagine the free and easy life of hunters? The naive students believed every word Fatty Tuyen said. Taptabang pushed up his glasses on the bridge of his nose and curiously asked, Big Brother Tuyen, what does wave a stick to hit a deer mean? Do you use a stick to hit them? Fatty Tuyen replied, 4 eyes. Seeing your eagerness to learn, I'll tell you. It means that if you're in the forest and just swing a stick randomly, you'll hit a deer and kill it. If you go to the river to scoop water and just scoop randomly, you'll definitely catch a big fish. It means there's an abundance of produce. Shirley Yang snorted, showing extreme disdain for Fatty Tuyen's story. The desert also has its merits. The variety of flora and fauna in the desert is no less than in the forest. Moreover, although the Taklamakan Desert lies in the lowest part of the basin, from a certain perspective, this place is the peak of ancient civilization. And in that forest, besides deer and bears, what else is there? Fearing they would start arguing, I said there were women in the room, and we brothers should go outside for a smoke. As I spoke, I pulled Fatty Tuyen out. In the sky, the moon shone like a painting, and stars twinkled like brocade, casting a silvery light across the ground. I lit a cigarette for Fatty Tuyen, advising him to be a little more accommodating towards Shirley Yang. Fatty Tuyen told me he naturally wouldn't argue with her. He asked if we, too, didn't understand the things those Americans didn't. Moreover, she was a woman. If she were a man, he would have twisted his neck and kicked him like a football long ago. I laughed, that's right, look who you are. You could pee a hole through the ground. As a gentleman, you must be magnanimous. Don't go twisting young Shirley Yang's neck. If you do, who will we demand our pay from? $20,000 is no small sum, you know. After exchanging a few laughs, I looked up and blew a perfect smoke ring into the air. I saw the 3 stars Jumen, Zuofu, and Hu Bayi sparkling in the sky, forming an equilateral triangle. In the center, Taiyang and Taiyin appeared together, truly a Kan Jop Kim Cat formation. I had never studied celestial Feng Shui before. It was only because I joined this archaeological team to earn some money that I quickly read through it a few times. Now, looking at the sky, the content of the Heaven chapter in the book, Feng Shui Mystical Arts, immediately came to mind. I quickly ran back to the room to get my compass, then climbed onto the city wall's rooftop. Comparing the stars in the sky, the place covered by the lucky stars was precisely where the ancient well in the city was. This was my first time practicing celestial Feng Shui, and I wasn't entirely confident, but it was almost certainly not wrong. My family's book, 16 Yin, Yang Feng Shui Mystical Arts, was no ordinary book. So, near an underground water vein, there must be an ancient tomb? Grave formations can also embrace water, but could it be too close? Regardless, this was a major discovery. I had to report it to the archaeological team. It would be best if they found something here, had a significant yield, then they probably wouldn't insist on venturing into the Black Desert anymore. Hearing me, Professor Chen was overjoyed. He immediately led his students rushing out, eager to climb down the well to investigate. The well lining and steel cables were later renovations. The original bucket rope and well lining had long since been destroyed, who knew when. I discussed with Shirley Yang that the well was very deep, and we could set up safety locks and rappel down to see what was there. So, it could only be me going down. Although there was an underground water vein below, I still dared not be careless. I put on a gas mask, carried a flashlight, a whistle, an engineer shovel, a dagger, and secretly hid a black donkey hoof and a Mojin charm on my person. I felt the rope to check its sturdiness, and we discussed communication methods. If my flashlight shone upwards and spun 3 times, those above should stop releasing the rope. If it spun in a circle a second time, they should pull the rope up. To prevent any mishaps, I also carried a whistle, so if people above couldn't see the flashlight beam, I would use the whistle to communicate. It was the middle of the night. Besides the flashlight beam, the well below was completely black. Even looking up, I couldn't clearly see where the well entrance was. The deeper I went, the colder it got. The desert temperature at night was already very low, and combined with the high humidity in the well, it made one feel chilled to the bone. The well walls were slippery, making it difficult to find footholds. It was said that this well was even older than Tibet city, meaning the well existed first, and then Tibet city was built. Suddenly, a cold gust of wind blew past. I quickly shone my flashlight and saw a stone door on the well wall. I looked up, blew my whistle, and waved my flashlight. This spot wasn't too far from the well entrance, only about 15 or 16 meters. If I spoke loudly, those above could hear me. Everyone received the signal and immediately stopped lowering the rope. I was hanging precariously just below the stone door. Cold wind blew out from the crack in the stone door. I pushed it with my hand, feeling that the door was very thick. There were no stone locks or latches. Although the crack was large, I couldn't push it open. A crowbar would be needed to open it. Seeing I couldn't enter, I sent the second signal, telling them to pull me up. I recounted the situation in the well in detail. Professor Chen found it very strange. How peculiar. This might not be a tomb, it must be some kind of underground passage. What tomb would be built next to a well, and with such a mysterious entrance? Fatty Tuyen thumped his chest and said, "Who cares what it is? All this complicated guesswork. We'll know once we go in. Everyone, lower me down, I'll pry open the door for you." I replied, "All right, if someone is going down, I'll still take the crowbar down." "You're too heavy. If the rope breaks by chance, we'll have to go down and retrieve you." This time, we made a rope ladder, so that after the stone door was opened, anyone who wanted to go down could cling to the rope and descend. Finally, it was decided that Professor Chen, Shirley, Yang, Tap-to-Bang, and I, a total of 4 people, would go down, while Fatty Tuyen and the others would stay above. I still went down first, using a crowbar to pry open the door. It seemed this door had been frequently opened and closed in the past, otherwise the gap wouldn't have been so wide. However, it might not have been opened in the last few hundred years. On the rope ladder, there was no leverage to exert force, so opening this door was truly exhausting. Behind the stone door was a wide and flat brick, paved passageway stretching deep into absolute darkness. I waved for those above to come down, then pulled each person inside. Shirley Yang distributed a type of pill to everyone, saying it was for oxygen deficiency prevention. With gas masks on as well, there would be no mishaps when going inside. The 4 of us advanced about 50 meters, passing through 2 stone doors one after another. The final door was sealed very tightly. Strange, unknown beasts were carved in relief on it, and a layer of animal hide was stuck in the door crack. We had to use a flat shovel to cut it away to open the door. Going all the way in, we entered a spacious, dry stone room, about 60 to 70 square meters in area and 3 meters high. The 4 of us standing inside didn't feel cramped at all. Although the space was spacious, the atmosphere was far from light. The ground was covered with white bones, leaving no place to step. Those bones were all animal bones, brittle and crumbling when stepped on. Around us, dozens of wooden pillars stood upright, with mummified corpses tied to them. Judging by their physiques, they were all young men. The 3 of us, Professor Chen, Shirley Yang, and I, were experienced individuals. We only found this place eerie, not frightening. Only Tap-to-Bang, seeing so many mummified corpses, was too scared to utter a word. Wherever the professor went, he followed, not leaving his side for half a step. Shirley Yang carefully examined the dried corpses and sighed, "How tragic." They were all slaves or prisoners taken for sacrificial burial. How utterly barbaric. Professor Chen told everyone, it seems this was a place for offering sacrifices to a very important person. This was a custom of the ancient County Mac kingdom. These people were all criminals, tied up and left to dry in the desert until they died of thirst, completely mummified, then brought here. Afterwards, animals were slaughtered, and their blood was poured over these dried corpses. Let's keep searching, there must be a burial chamber in here. We walked around, searching everywhere. All 4 walls were solid rock. Tapping them a few times clearly indicated they were solid, so there probably wasn't any other space inside. It was Shirley Yang, always meticulous, who discovered a problem with the floor. I cleared away the pile of bone fragments, and underneath, a stone slab carved with a relief was revealed, with 2 pulling rings at either end. I called Tap to Bang to help pull up the stone slab. Seeing him trembling and stuttering, I burst out laughing. I decided to send him back up the same way he came, lest he wet his pants down here. While I was at it, I called Hatch Eye Kwok down as well. He would definitely be very interested in this peculiar tomb. Tap to Bang, as if granted amnesty, scurried back. Professor Chen was both annoyed and amused. Oh dear, this lad is too timid. He has no archaeological qualities at all. Shirley, Yang and I combined our strength to pull up the stone slab on the ground. Next, I dropped a flare down, illuminating the space below. We saw a burial chamber nearly as large as the room above, with a square wooden coffin placed in the center. However, the coffin was slightly different from those inland. It had no decorative patterns and was not rectangular, but perfectly square, looking like a large chest. Not only had I never seen this type of burial chamber and coffin style, but even someone as learned as Professor Chen couldn't make heads or tails of it. This was likely a lost burial custom of some ancient ethnic group, significantly influenced by Han culture, but not merely copying it, instead blending in many of their own unique cultural characteristics, truly extremely rare. At this moment, Hatch Eye Kwok arrived, bringing Sokeen with him. As soon as he saw the situation inside, his eyes lit up. He put on a gas mask, jumped down first, examining one spot, then another, looking around excitedly behind him. I had always thought he was a serious, old-fashioned person, but now he looked like a child, gesticulating wildly and constantly running his hands through his hair. We also descended into the burial chamber below, one by one. Upon first glance, we all couldn't help but exclaim, "Ah!" The 4 walls of the burial chamber were entirely covered with colorful, incredibly exquisite murals. Professor Chen looked at one of the paintings, moved to the point of choking up. This painting, the event recorded in this painting, is related to the Tin Tuyet Kingdom. What I most wanted to see were the valuable burial items. This coffin was not small. Who knew what interesting things might be inside? Although I couldn't take anything in front of the professors, it could at least broaden my horizons. At this moment, I felt that this noble tomb was even more luxurious than the general's tomb at Hak Fong Kao. But Professor Chen was examining the murals on the burial chamber walls, paying no attention to the coffin. I patiently waited, standing and listening to Professor Chen explain the content of the murals to the others. The first few paintings clearly indicated that the tomb's occupant during his lifetime was a prince of the Komak kingdom. Komak was a vassal state of Tin Tuyet, subjected to constant oppression. Each year, it had to pay a large tribute of jewels, cattle, goats, and slaves. This prince had gone to plead with the queen of Tin Tuyet 3 times for the freedom of his people, but he never managed to meet the queen. This painting roughly stated that he was unwilling to accept this fate. This brave prince, an incarnation of the Sun War god, had infiltrated Tin Tuyet alone to assassinate the wicked queen, but instead discovered an enormous secret. After listening for a while, I too became engrossed in Professor Chen's narration, curious about what that secret truly was. I quickly ran over to stand with Shirley, Yang and the others, listening to the professor's explanation. Professor Chen stepped over to a mural, examined it thoroughly for a long time, then said, "The meaning of this painting is very strange. Everyone, look. In the painting, the prince is hiding in a corner, peeking. The face of the queen of Tin Tuyet is covered by a thin veil in all the paintings. In this one, only her back is visible. She lifts her veil with one hand, and the person opposite her, who seems to be a slave or something, turns into a shadow. And then vanishes?" I was confused, about to ask for more details, but then I heard Shirley Yang say, "This queen is a demon." Demon? Professor Chen paused for a moment upon hearing these words, then said to Shirley Yang, "Interesting, try to explain your thoughts." Shirley Yang pointed at the mural and said, "The artist who painted this mural was highly skilled. The lines are ornate and lifelike, recounting important events in the life of this prince of the Komak kingdom. Although there are no textual annotations, the narrative is still very clear and intricate." As I listened to Shirley Yang's analysis, I looked closer at the painting. Indeed, just as she said, the characters, costumes, architecture, and expressions in the painting were all incredibly lifelike. If one understood Western region's culture, they could roughly grasp the context of the events depicted in the mural based on the information in the painting. Shirley Yang continued, "Just now, the professor mentioned that this painting is the most difficult to interpret among all the murals here." The queen lifted her veil, which from beginning to end had covered her face, and the figure opposite her immediately turned into a faint, blurred outline. All the characters in the painting were drawn with realistic brushwork, except for the figure opposite the Queen of Tin Tuyet, which was painted with blurred lines, only vaguely outlining the external contours. Based solely on these lines, we cannot verify the character's identity. We can only guess that this blurred figure is probably a slave or an assassin, an enemy the queen wished to eliminate. Upon hearing this, I blurted out, "Miss Yang, do you mean the person in the painting saw the queen's face and then just vanished?" Shirley Yang replied, "Something like that. If I were to explain it in my own words, I would say that the moment the queen's eyes looked at this person, that person immediately vanished." I shook my head and forced a smile. A living person just looked at and then vanishes instantly? Vanishes without a trace? This is too truly incomprehensible. I honestly don't understand it at all. Professor Chen seemed to understand Shirley Yang's meaning and gestured for her to continue. Shirley Yang said, "Although what I just said was only speculation, it wasn't entirely groundless. My father during his lifetime enjoyed reading a book called Great Tang Records on the Western Regions, written by the eminent monk Xuanzang of the Tang dynasty. I also read through it a few times. The book recorded many mythical legends, but also quite a few real events. Among them was a city, and within that city lived a people from underground. They conquered and ruled the small surrounding states. After several hundred years, the throne was passed to a queen. It was said that this queen's eyes were a gateway to the underworld. She only needed to look at an enemy, and that person would immediately vanish without a trace, never to return. Where the vanished person went, perhaps only they themselves knew. The queen ruled very harshly. She forced the people of the surrounding countries to worship her as a deity, and all those who resisted were flayed alive and executed. Perhaps her actions angered Allah, for the queen died of a strange illness after only a few years of tormenting her people. The slaves feared the queen most. As soon as she died, they joined forces with the small nations oppressed by the queen, forming an alliance army and bathed the queen's royal city in blood. As the alliance army prepared to destroy the queen's mausoleum, the heavens and earth changed color. A terrifying sandstorm engulfed the entire royal city and the alliance army. The queen's mausoleum and countless treasures she had amassed were all buried under layers of golden sand. After several hundred years, the shifting desert caused the royal city to see sunlight once again. Some travelers passing through, if they took any treasure from the city, would cause windstorms, dense smoke and dust, and then get lost. Those who took the queen's jewels would never be able to leave that place. However, information about the mysterious city, the cruel queen, and the exact dates and contemporary context were not precisely recorded in the book. Today, seeing these murals and comparing them with that ancient legend, I am surprised that there are so many striking similarities, giving one the feeling that it is not merely a legend, but perhaps such events truly occurred in that dust-shrouded history. Shirley Yang then let everyone continue looking at the remaining murals. The reason I dare to assert that the queen in the painting is the Queen of Tin Tuyet is because the attire of the Tin Tuyet people is very distinctive, as are the architecture and other unique ornaments. These are the most convincing pieces of evidence. Professor, Uncle Yi, everyone, look at these murals further back. They further prove that my inference is reliable. The meaning expressed in these paintings is very clear. The prince's assassination attempt on the queen failed, and upon returning to his country, he continued to plot to eliminate her. At that time, the prince met a fortune-teller from a distant land. This fortune-teller advised the prince to imbue specially prepared slow-acting poison into golden goat meat, then present it as tribute to the queen. Indeed, not long after, news arrived that the queen had died suddenly. At the same time, the prince also died prematurely due to overwork. The prince and his beloved wife were buried together. The fortune teller designed a mausoleum, burying them beneath the sacrificial altar in this sacred well. It turned out that the altar above existed first, and then the burial chamber was built beneath it. The important events in the murals all corresponded with the details recorded in that book. Professor Chen saw that Shirley Yang, though a photographer, came from a family with an archaeological tradition, was knowledgeable and well-informed. Having a daughter like her, his old classmate must have been greatly comforted. At this moment, he remembered his old friend who had gone missing in the desert, and tears involuntarily welled up. Shirley Yang said to the professor, "You should take care of your health, don't be too sad." This time, our findings are significant, with breakthrough progress in understanding the Tin Tuyet ruins. I believe that before long, we will definitely be able to find the ancient city of Tin Tuyet. My father, with his spirit in heaven, can now rest in peace. I listened, my heart filled with dismay. I had thought that finding this ancient tomb would make them turn back, but unexpectedly, things didn't go as desired. In this situation, advising them further would be useless. If I had known this earlier, I would have pretended not to see it from the beginning. I suddenly remembered Shirley Yang saying that the Queen of Tin Tuyet was a demon, so I asked, "Miss Yang, I recall that earlier when you were discussing it was mentioned that the Queen of Tin Tuyet was the foremost beauty of the western regions. Other women standing before her would be like the moon and stars encountering the sun, overshadowed and hidden. Now you say she's actually a demon? Aren't we just seeking death by looking for a demon's tomb?" Shirley Yang replied, "Those are all just legends combined with our deductions, and we cannot be certain they are facts. That's how archaeological work is. Legends, records, excavated artifacts, combined with scholars' conjectures. The more content there is, the closer we get to the truth of history. But all we can do is approach the truth asymptotically. No historical event can ever be fully restored. In ancient times, humanity's understanding of the world was very limited. Some phenomena considered very common today were exaggerated into demons, monsters, or miracles back then. Even today, with highly developed science, there are still countless phenomena that cannot be explained scientifically. I believe those phenomena are not because deities or devils truly exist, but simply because the scope of scientific research is not yet sufficient. In the years to come, answers to unsolved scientific puzzles will surely be found through scientific means. I continued, "So, the Queen of Tin Tuyet's ability to make a person disappear in an instant, how should this be explained in an era of highly developed civilization and science like today?" Shirley Yang replied, "Uncle Yi, I wonder if you've heard about an incident that once caused a stir in America. At a research center for peculiar phenomena and pathologies in Kansas, USA, a very special patient appeared. He was a 12-year-old boy who since childhood had a strange ability. When he stared for a long time at an object with a diameter smaller than 5 millimeters, that object would disappear, as if evaporating into thin air. Neighbors regarded the boy as some kind of anomaly, calling him a demon. His parents were also troubled by this, so they greatly hoped that relevant government agencies could help them treat the boy. This was truly strange. I had never heard of it before. I didn't even know much about events in our own China, let alone odd stories from America. What kind of condition was that, exactly? It sounded quite similar to that demon queen. So, was the boy eventually cured? Shirley Yang replied, "Through research, scientists discovered that the boy's brainwaves were different from ordinary people's. His brain nerves and optic nerves produced a type of transport energy, and this energy connected to a virtual digital space, a non-perceptible spatial region. This peculiar ability only accounts for 1/3 of a billion in humanity. Finally, a researcher found a method. They created a magnetic cap for the boy to wear. A year later, the boy's special ability disappeared. At that time, the U.S. military had a secret plan to take the boy to the National Military Research Center, but the matter was exposed, and facing widespread public opposition, they had no choice but to cancel the plan." Hearing this story, my heart felt uneasy again. That wicked queen from the legend, I feared, was not as simple as the American boy. I wasn't afraid to die, but if we found the Queen's mausoleum and she somehow made us disappear to an unknown place, what then? Anyway, we take it one step at a time. If it truly became dangerous, I would use tough tactics to drag them back. Who would dare disobey orders? Damn it, I didn't believe these intellectuals' arms could twist my thighs. I'd beat them to death first. Talking at length, we wasted quite a bit of time, and all the surrounding murals had already been studied. I asked Professor Chen if we should examine the contents of the coffin.